Today, we're going to build an entry coat rack. This is a simple project you can complete in just a weekend. Let's get started. After you've selected your stock, we have to get it ready to work with. This always starts with milling. You can see here me setting up my planer sled. This is a technique I got from a local guy named Mike. Thanks, Mike. What you do is get a flat piece of melamine. Then you shim around your board to take out any wobble. Once you have the shims placed and all the wobble is completely gone, you take a hot glue gun and you add glue to the shims, the melamine, and the board. This will hold everything in place as your sled travels through the planer. Once the glue is cooled, we can start running the sled through the planer. It's best to take multiple light passes. This way you don't overload your planer and trip the breaker or get an undesirable result on your board. Then, when you have a nice smooth side, you can remove the board from the sled. I spray a little alcohol on the glue and use a putty knife to separate it. The glue comes right off the melamine easy. I usually get my boards ripped on one side when I buy them. This allows me to rip the other side using my table saw. Here, I'm setting the blade height for my board. Now, I'm checking to make sure I remove all the sapwood on this rip cut, and I place the board flat on my table to make sure my edge is straight. Once the side is ripped, I can flip it around and rip the board to final width. With the sides ripped, it's back to the planer. This time to get the board flat on both sides. Again, multiple light passes down to your desired thickness. Here, we use our calipers to check our thickness, making sure our board is where we wanted it to be. Dead on 3/4 of an inch. Now we break out the crosscut sled to square off the ends and get the boards cut to final length. We should end up with 2 flat boards, 3/4 of an inch thick, and 4 square corners. Now we move over to the router table to set the bit to cut the dado. With the board being 3/4 of an inch, I'm using a 3/4 inch bit. I start with a 1/4 inch depth first pass, then I move the bit up to reach my final depth of 5/8. Now I set the fence to the distance I want the dado to be, and we're ready to cut. This was the first of 3 passes. Just like with the planer, I prefer multiple lighter passes, sneaking up on my final depth. Here, we check the fit. Pretty good. I like it the tiniest bit loose to accept the glue and allow for the wood to expand. Now, we've added the glue and it's time to clamp the shelf in place. I used a couple parallel clamps and some blocks to make sure the shelf would be square before really clamping down for the glue up to dry. Checking square. Out of the clamps now, and it's time to measure and mark for the keyholes. This was my first time doing keyholes, so I was just happy if it would hang on the wall without falling. I'm sure there are better techniques to do this, and I'm going to try some different ones in the future. But this time it worked out fine. With the holes made, I used the old tape trick. You simply put a piece of painter's tape over your holes and mark the spots, and then you transfer the tape to the wall to see where you need to drill your screws. Now it's time to lay out the spacing for the coat hooks. I definitely suggest using a ruler for this. The tape measure got a little awkward. With the spacing set, let's drill some pilot holes for the hardware we'll be putting on for the hooks. I'm going to spare you from watching the sanding and skip to the best part. I just love the way walnut comes alive when you put finish on it. It never gets old. For this project, I used a wipe-on oil-based poly I made by mixing polyurethane and mineral spirits in a 50-50 ratio. Once this finish dries, we can add the hardware and get this thing hung on the wall.